Sealioning is bad faith, persistent questioning, which is being masked as genuine and sincere curiosity.
I love that sealioning is a term and how that term came from and that people are talking about it. I really like this video that this beginning is pulled from because he does a really good job at describing what it looks like when somebody is sealioning you or when someone is being sealioned. It's, you know, it comes from this old comic of this obnoxious sea lion who's just so annoying for so long, and then finally the other person snaps and they're like, oh, well, I never. The problem with me is that I ask a lot of questions, especially in like debates or like an argument or like when I'm trying to figure something out with someone. And it's worse then because anxiety is up and I'm trying not to be anxious. I'm trying to use the thinky part of me, but that means I want to be extra sure of what I'm understanding and what I'm listening. My brain gets hungry. I'm always curious, right? Like it's fun to learn new things, but when I get into this thing where like, oh my gosh, I'm disagreeing with someone, especially when it's a topic that I'm particularly interested in or vested in or something like that, and the other person seems just like quite opposed to me, there's usually something I'm not understanding and it bothers me. So yeah, I'm going to ask questions, but I'm also going to like double check. And this is a problem for a lot of people who ask a lot of clarifying questions. You don't want to be a sea lion. You don't want to be the annoying person who has to know every little detail, but precision is power to a point. So to add on to the content of that video that was defining sealioning, I also kind of wanted to add a couple of mine that are not sealioning. That's just somebody asking questions to gain understanding in a conversation because the difference can be really subtle. So like a good faith question is one that defines a term that doesn't change unless you both agree on it, or the clarification that's made stays consistent and it helps down the road and helps to narrow the scope of the conversation. It doesn't just get ignored and kind of come up again later. You know, that hunger in the brain, like what can I conclude next? Because I'm trying to think of the next thing I'm going to say, and what you're about to say, the answer to that question is going to form my next thought. It's not like I'm just asking a question to waste your time and your effort. I already got one loaded in the back. What I'm calculating depends on your answer, and sea lions don't do that. And usually people who are asking clarifying questions are seeking an endpoint of not necessarily a resolution, but like, you know, we're going towards something, and sea lions don't do that. The point is to exhaust the person making points. So if you're in a discussion with someone who's asking a ton of questions, see how they're doing it. Will they also define their own terms? They're asking you to define terms. Are they willing to define terms too? Are they willing to give a clear, concise stance on what it is they're talking about it? Or are they only demanding that you give your stance and clarify exactly what you mean? Are they willing to do the same thing on their side? It's like a mutual vulnerability. And with that comes frustration. Like there's always frustration in an argument. How's that other person responding? Are they being really cool and just watching you get more and more frustrated? Or are they seeing that you're getting frustrated and just kind of backing off a little bit? Maybe even saying, I see there's a little frustration here. Maybe we should circle back around or do this a different time. Do they respect your frustration? And though I like to know what I'm talking about, and I do like precise language and precision when we're talking about ideas and terms, you don't hold that. There is room for some temporary ambiguity with some of it, and I would never dismiss a point as completely invalid just because it couldn't be precisely defined. A point or an idea not being able to be fully, perfectly defined should not be dismissed as invalid. I recognize that not everybody is comfortable with explicit reasoning. I definitely wasn't, especially if you weren't exactly taught how to communicate with other people, and then like if there's some sort of relationship dynamics going on or whatever argument is going on, see what kind of frustration is building up in the argument. How does that other person respond? Because sea lions love frustration. That's the whole point of doing it. Because as I said, the tactic isn't to build understanding. It's just to build frustration on the part of the person who's trying to make the argument to the point where they just explode or shut down or stop arguing and they've won. So if you find yourself in conversation with somebody who you think is sea lioning, you can say, well, what do you think my stance is? Can you please say back to me what you think my stance is before I go ahead and clarify this question for you? Ask them to summarize your position and then ask, what would be a satisfying answer to you? What kind of answer can I give you that would be satisfactory for you? And then at last, you could always say something like, I'll explain this one more time, or we can try this one more time, but I just don't think we're going to agree. And that's okay. Because it's hard sometimes being somebody who asks a bunch of questions. My dad used to say I used to ask a lot of questions. He never got super annoyed. He would just answer them for me. But I've been in a couple of situations where I could just tell that someone was getting really upset with me. Like a sea lion would make someone, but I swear I was not. I was just trying to understand. And I've also been extremely grateful for the people who seem to understand what I was trying to do, because there were also a couple of times I was just not getting a concept. I wasn't getting an idea or an opinion, something. You know, I can't remember the conversations or the people, but I remember that feeling of being with someone who I respected, talking about something that meant a lot to me. And I was like, how are you, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And I kept asking like a ladder of questions because, okay, that's clarified, but that doesn't explain this part of it. And so I felt like I was picking apart this poor person's like argument or whatever it was we were talking about. But it wasn't, because ultimately there was one thing that I wasn't getting, or that they hadn't explained, or something that we had defined as two different things. Socially, definitions aren't the same. So I don't know if that was helpful. I don't know if I did anything, but those are some things that you can look for rather than shutting down if you are conversing with a sea lion, or if you are conversing as a sea lion, but you're not an actual sea lion. If you're just asking a whole bunch of questions and you see someone getting really frustrated with you, take a step back and be like, listen, I'm not trying to be difficult, I promise. Because sea lions say, I'm just asking questions. That's all I'm doing. They're asking questions, but in such a way as to not further understanding. So if you can use words that show that you're trying to further the understanding and you're not just trying to be difficult and shut things down, is something that you've got to practice. So if you're trying to sea lion someone and exhaust them and then also be authentic, you're just going to come off as super duper dumb because you're not getting the answers that are given to you, because you're just discarding the answer as soon as it's given.